So here we are again. Right? It's like we never leave, right? How many times have you seen me do this? Well, we're going to do it again. One. The little guy wanted to slide right off there. There's a fairly significant problem that potters will have on the bottoms of their pots. They'll call it an S-crack because the crack is shaped basically like an S. But really, that's a crack this way and a crack this way. It's really two cracks across the center. It almost always goes directly through the center. Where does that come from? Well, when I was younger, back in college, they would call it a compression crack. Well, that should give you a hint. But it's really a non-compression crack. It's where the clay has not been compressed. It's about compressing this clay so that you're telling it which way you want it to remember to go in the end. Okay, and it all starts right now. So there's the problem. You see that you can't hardly see it, but there's a little peak where it goes down like that because I started moving too quickly. Now I'm going to take care of that because that's part of my muscle memory. And I'll go back and I'm going to fix that here in a second. Right now. So I press on the center. And you'll see there's a little point. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but there's a little point there still because you tend to move away from that center. Well, duh, right? So depending on how much of the center part here I've worked this way, how big that crack could be. It's never that big because everybody works out here. But how tightly that crack may be depends on how hard I'm working. Now, one way you can fix it if it's a big problem for you is to thumb it back. So use your thumb, press down and move back towards the center. That way you are actually working that center part, the very center, versus just pulling out from the center. You'll have fewer cracks, or maybe none. But a lot of folks will have a little tiny crack in the middle because they're pressing outwardly too far, and they're creating a point, and then you'll see that point in the center when they're throwing. But they don't even think about it because they're worried about compressing the clay across the foot. Well, that's not where the crack doesn't happen out here. This clay gets compressed pretty easily. We think about it all the time. Where it doesn't get compressed is in the middle. The reason it doesn't get compressed in the middle is because we are moving too quickly. You need to sit on it, camp on that space. Just because I was talking, I messed this up a little bit. There you go. So that's something to think about when you're throwing, is not moving quite so rapidly away from that center and working some magic on that very center part of the button. The very center. Not an eighth of an inch away from the center. The very center. Half an inch away, you have an inch crack. An inch away, you have a big crack. Quarter of an inch, half inch crack. Eighth of an inch, quarter inch crack. 16th of an inch, eighth inch crack. See? Because you're working on the center part of it. I've always felt like that if I was to take the water out of the bottom in the very center, there's sometimes a little puddle there. And if I take that away from the clay at this stage, I always feel like there's less of a chance for that S crack because I'm taking the slip away, not just the water, but the slip. And I'm leaving that clay that I've taken the time to compress so that it's all going the same way. It's not actually just compressing it this way. It's making all the clay go the same way. That's why you end up with two cracks. It's really two cracks because your clay is not all wanting to remember where to go correctly. So here's a classic example of pulling from one side versus the other. You'll see that the outside lip is higher than the inside lip. And you'll also notice that there's a little goo right in the middle. The clay needs to be, the top of the clay needs to be, and when I use that, let's say compress, it needs to be made so that all of the top is strong structural clay. There's still a little gizmo right there. And once that's taken care of, then you can continue. But if you don't take care of that, you end up with the very top edge that will shrink at different rates in firing. It'll always be a problem for you the whole way through. You really want to take care of that in the early stages, and not just cosmetically. You want to know that that's solid clay. What most people will do to make sure that it's solid clay is they'll cut it off with a pen tool. Probably notice I don't have a pin tool sitting here, right? This is not necessary to cut the top of your pot off if you know what you need to do to that top lip. So for potters and wannabe potters, you know, if you're just starting to learn, and I'm going to give you another hint here. You know, we tend to call this whole thing clay, but this is not all clay. It's made up of some other things, primarily sands and grogs and that kind of stuff. And frankly, the clay is of different diameters, and they do that to create properties that will allow you to throw more easily or to hand build with some clays, raku, translucency, all those different things create a need for different materials in your clay. So while we call this in mass clay, it's not all. Now, where am I going with that? When you spend too much time or an extraordinary amount of time centering, pulling, whatever you're doing to your clay body, whatever I'm doing here, the more time I spend drenching it, rubbing it, having it rub me, feeling good about it, whatever your problem is, right? You're really taking up the good stuff. So all the slippery stuff is the clay itself. You're not going to find your bucket full of sand. You're going to find your throwing bucket full of clay. So the less of that I do, the better it is for the pot. So you don't end up with a sandy mess at the end. Wow, right? So when I talk about, in some of my videos, I talk about the speed that you need to get to throw good pots. It's about making a better pot. So it's not just a matter of throwing quickly to be able to throw quickly. There's a good reason for that. And That's the reason. So you can leave the clay behind. So in my case, with this clay, I need to work fairly quickly because of the more sand than normal, and it'll create a situation where I end up with a rough pot. And we don't want that.